Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapter 7 of Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. I'm recording this episode just a few days after I put out the last one, so hopefully I can get this to you sometime soon, although I have that last episode recorded for weeks and weeks before I actually put that up, so who knows. I'm not making any predictions anymore. I've learned my lesson about that. I'm just going to try to get these out to you when I have the opportunity to. But yeah, hopefully I can get this done soon. So before we start, I did briefly mention last time how I'm going to start doing news at the end of the episodes so that I can be sure that if it goes up late, that it's going to be like recent, like more recent, I guess. If I do it at the start of the episode and then I don't finish the episode until way later, it doesn't really make any sense to have the news at the beginning if I'm going to start doing it that way, which I might end up having to do. Although I think I should be able to get this one done in one sitting. Maybe not, actually. I don't know. We'll see. So before anything else, I did want to start with something that I didn't think I'd be doing for a little bit, but I've decided to go ahead and do this now. I have an email, and at this point, I think I have, I don't know, maybe a half dozen to a dozen regular listeners, which is enough for me to want to give this avenue to reach out and contact me if you have anything you want to hear about the show, criticism, positive feedback, whatever, any kind of feedback, suggestions, questions, anything like that. You can direct it to this email, and I will respond to it in due time. I'll try to check it reasonably often, although I'm not sure if I can. I'm sure I could check it every day. Anyway, the email is turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com. That's turnwheelpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. No hyphens, nothing like that. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have. But other than that, I don't really have anything else. We're going to do news at the end, like I said, so we can go ahead and get started by talking about Chapter 7, called Beyond the Desert. This is a really, really interesting chapter. I think that in some ways this is one of the best chapters in the game, and I do really mean that. And I don't think that this is a super popular chapter. I think that it's. I don't think this game really has any popular chapter. I'm trying to think, are there any chapters that people just genuinely really, really like in general? I think chapter 5, but that's more for the story. I think chapter 10 people tend to enjoy. Maybe chapter 9. I'm not really sure. I don't know. I know, in later games there are some chapters that people the general consensus is yes, these are really good chapters. I can't think of any for this game that I hear people talk about as being the best. So I'm not really sure, but I'm inclined to think that this one is not super popular because it does have a lot of things that are not well liked in the general Fire Emblem community, and including myself. There are definitely things about this map that I don't like. That's why I said in some ways I think it is the best map in the game. There's a lot to like and there's a lot to not like. But before we get into the actual map design, let's talk about the story. So at the end of the last chapter, Seliph had just taken back Isaac, basically. He took back all of Isaac and liberated it from the Empire. And this is a big deal. I think, they never explicitly say this in the game, but the implication is that most resistances get stamped out immediately. So the fact that one was not able to only grow to this size, but also to actually accomplish something this impressive is a big deal. And word is starting to spread about Seliph and the resistance. It kind of inspires other rebellions to sort of come into play, but they all kind of get stamped out pretty much immediately. So Leaf has started his own rebellion. Leaf is Quan's son, and Leaf has sort of been doing his own resistance effort off screen, although that is actually the focus, in case you didn't know. That resistance effort that Leaf is putting up is the focus of the next game in the series that we're going to be talking about, so you'll have that to look forward to. But anyway, at this point, he has suffered heavy casualties, and he is not going to be able to hold out for much longer. So Seliph has decided to go and help him out, join forces, and hopefully combine their strength. To get there, though, they need to cross the Yied Desert, which is sort of under the control of the Loptyrian Empire, which are the big bad evil guys of the story. Besides the Granvale Empire, the Loptyr Empire is sort of the behind the scenes manipulator type guys. And then once they're through the desert, they have to conquer Darna, which they just kind of name drop here. They talk about it later this chapter, but if you remember from earlier in the story, or not even from earlier in the story, this is something I complained about not being part of the story early on. Darna is a big deal in this world, and they kind of just brush past it here. I don't really know why they don't even mention anything about it at the start here, but I don't know. That's not really that important, I guess. And then they also have to conquer a place called Fort Melgan in order to get to, I believe it's Manster or Ulster. No, Ulster. Yeah, it's Ulster. They need to get to Ulster and help Leaf because that's sort of where the enemies are attacking Leaf. It cuts over to Leaf, who is with Finn, and Nana, who is the daughter of Lachesis, Diarmuid's sister. And they're not having a good time. Finn kind of reports to Leaf that every single soldier that they had sent to Ulster had been killed. And Leaf is very unhappy about this. He's genuinely extremely upset. He's like, damn, I really thought we were going to get the upper hand here. I thought this was our chance, but we ended up just screwing everything up. But they know that Seliph is on his way, and that hopefully they can meet up and turn the tide of the battle. Leaf says something here that makes me question some of the stuff that I don't know how to word it. At the end of or during my discussion about chapter 5, something that I brought up was the question of when or does Arvis know that Deirdre was originally married to Sigurd? And the reason I ask that is that, at least retroactively, 17 years after the fact, everyone else seems to know that that's true. Because Leif talks about Seliph as being the son of Sigurd and Deirdre, Princess Deirdre. So, people know about this. So I can only imagine that Arvis must know. Did he know the whole time? It's never made clear, but obviously he knows now. Which has some interesting implications on his character. Unfortunately, I don't think we see Arvis for another. Do we see him at all until chapter 10? I don't think so. I said that's one of my biggest criticisms of the story of this game is that they really kind of don't handle Arvis very well after the time skip, in my opinion. But we'll get there. Or I guess I shouldn't say that they don't handle him well. I think he just doesn't get enough screen time, in my opinion. But again, we'll get there. So Leif and Co. decide that they're going to abandon the castle that they have been guarding, which is Leinster, because Bloom is on his way and they won't be able to hold out there for very long. So they decide to run away, basically, and let the castle fall, but they live to fight another day. We then cut to a thief fleeing from the Yied Shrine, which is where the Loptyr Empire is kind of based in this area. And I say thief rather than giving them a specific name because normally it's going to be Patty. And I guess, everything I said about Nana earlier, you could swap out her substitute. I think Jeanne? I don't know if I'm saying that right, but oh yeah. So this is my first substitute character, Patty, or no, Daisy. If you remember, I got 4 substitute characters: Bridget's kids and Sylvia's kids they're all the substitute characters for me. this is going to be an interesting experience. I've never played with any of the substitute characters before, and for the most part, except for like Iselo, who like Fivale isn't very good anyway. So his substitute being Iselo doesn't really make a difference for me. All the other ones are kind of just like they're all utility units, so their skills and stats and things don't really matter all that much. So I think this is a good way to try out substitute characters for the first time. Anyway, Daisy has stolen some treasure from the Yied shrine and is running away when she's met by Shannon, who we see Shannon for the first time. He sees Daisy and he says, "Hey, I noticed you have a sword there. You can have everything else, but I need the sword. Like you got to give me the sword." And Daisy kind of gets mad and tells him off, like, "Hey, I stole this treasure fair and square. Why should I give it up to you?" And the cutscene kind of ends before they can sort of resolve this. The reason I'm laughing is because it cuts over to the Loptyr mages in the shrine, and they're talking about how Daisy got away with all their stuff, and their leader kind of says, "Hey, go capture them," and one of his subordinates says, "Hey, can't you just like smite them from here with your long range tome?" And he's like, "I lost it. I literally lost my long range tome. I can't think of. I mean, it's kind of it reminds me a bit of if you've played FE7 in chapter 19X, which is the first Kishuna map. There's that character, the boss of that chapter has a bolting tome, and he can't use it for the period of time that Kishun is there. And this is kind of like that mechanically. He will find it eventually. And you have a while, and it's if you're reloading saves, it's actually very easy to just kill him with Shannon before he's able to find it. But I just think that it's so funny that they lampshade it like this. Like, well, we kind of don't want to make it too hard for the player right away. What do we do? And they're like, oh well, we can have him, like, we got to have him like not have the long range tome at first. But how do we do that? How do we make it so that he doesn't, like, why would he just not use his long range tome if he has one? And someone in the room was like, well, what if he just lost it? What if he just couldn't find it? And everyone's like, all right, well, give this man a raise because that's what we're going with. I genuinely think this is one of the funniest moments in the game. It's not. I'm kind of hyping it up a little bit. Like it's not that funny for like most people aren't gonna like see this and think it's that funny. I no, bandits are really the only Fire Emblem villains that ever get treated with this level of levity, I guess. Normally, when especially the big bad like dark mages are treated with such a serious tone, such a dark atmosphere. They're creepy, they're um, sinister, and they're dangerous, and you feel like they're threatening. This fucking guy is just treated as a goddamn joke, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I think it's great. I think that the Loptyr Empire is. I'm not super invested in them as villains. They kind of fill the role of bandits for me in this story, to be completely honest, in terms of how invested I am in their in them as a threat. So I think that this is perfectly appropriate, and I'm spending way longer on this than it probably deserves, but I just thought it was interesting. This they, at least as far as I can remember, and as I go through the series, maybe I will find an instance of this again. I cannot think of a single other time in this series where a villain that is not a bandit, and especially not a dark mage, is treated like a joke in this way. I just think it's a unique moment that I thought was really funny in a game that is, on the whole, very dark, and kind of gritty and atmospheric. This game does not use humor a lot. Um, some of the stuff with the dancers is kind of funny. but otherwise it's very like grim for the most part. So it's just nice to see a joke like this in here. I just think that that's genuinely really funny, and it serves a mechanical purpose as well. So it's a double whammy. We then cut to Seliph and Lewin, who are talking about the Yied Desert and sort of what they need to do. They're just kind of basically making their battle plan, right? But there's a moment here where Lewin kind of suggests that they actually I think it might have been Seliph, I don't remember. Someone suggests that they need to take the fort. Sorry, they need to take the shrine before they move on through the desert. I don't remember the reasoning, but it's someone says, "Oh, we should probably take the Yied shrine before we continue moving on towards Leinster." And Lewin, I believe, says that it's going to be dangerous, and he says we may need to make sacrifices. And Seliph says, "So be it." And I think that line. It's so simple, right? Like it's three words. So be it. And I mean, he goes on like I that's what I wrote it down as in my notes. He goes on to say like war is dangerous. We come this far. Yada yada stuff like that. Fire Emblem protagonists get painted as being these bleeding heart Disney princesses. And to be honest, I have not really paid enough attention to the writing in most of these games to tell you if that perception is true or not. Um, at any rate, if a character or a protagonist has had a moment where they were like, sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices. It's not a big part of their character, and it's not something that the game really draws attention to as a core plot point. So it's a lot easier to pick up on the parts where they're like, we gotta save our friends, and I won't leave anyone behind. Um, in fact, there are moments that like I think there are explicitly times where like Leaf says, "I'm not leaving anyone behind," or like Marth is a core theme of Marth's games is allies and like the bonds that keep us together. The same thing with Awakening. Bonds play a big role in that game. This is, to my knowledge, again, this is probably something that will change as I go through these games and refresh my memory on the story. This is the only instance I can think of where someone says, "Hey, we might need to like kill off some of our guys to well not kill off, but like, we might lose some guys on the way to do this objective." And the protagonist just says, "Yeah, you're probably right." If there's no like, "We'll make it through with the power of friendship." And there's another instance later in this game where you are heavily incentivized to kill off one of your characters. I've actually never had to do it, humble brag, but you are basically like either you put into a scenario where you either need to kill off a character or you are you're going to have a really difficult obstacle to overcome. And I think that's cool that this game, in a way that no other game really does, treats death as being like an inevitability. Um, I think it's especially interesting since in the more recent games, and saying more recent games is kind of a misnomer because I'd say that this trend extends as far back as hell. I would honestly maybe argue FE2, but at the very latest, maybe FE I guess FE5 or 6. Death is no longer a core feature of these games. And you might hear me say that and think like, what are you talking about? Of course it is. But when I say that, I mean like the games are no longer designed around being Iron Man. The earlier games, they want you to play through having lost the units and deal with that loss. FE1 and its remake, also FE3 and especially FE3 remake, kind of give you throwaway backup units to use in case your good ones die. And then FE2 and its remake have these they have far fewer characters, so the deaths hurt a lot more in terms of like your gameplay power. Like losing one unit in FE2 is a big deal. But they also have the revival shrines, and they're pretty generous with the revival shrines, which is crazy because when you think about it, like most revival mechanics in Fire Emblem, you get like one. You can lose a unit and you will eventually be able to get them back, so it's not as big of a deal. And I think that that's why Iron Manning is still reasonable in those games, even though the actual number of units is significantly lower. Now, with all of that said, so I think that this is an interesting subject to talk about. Is this concept of death in Fire Emblem and how it is handled both mechanically and narratively. And FE4 is kind of in this weird spot where I think narratively it treats death as like a big deal. And I think mechanically it gets most of the way there. Obviously it's saying here like sometimes sacrifices are necessary. Leaf sacrifices. I mean, he doesn't know that they're gonna die, but he sends all of his units on a suicide mission to Ulster, and they all get wiped out. And he thinks, he kind of says, man, I made a bad tactical decision, but he never once says like, man, I let all those guys die. I should have just let the power of friendship carry us through. Like he doesn't start talking about bonds or whatever. He's like I think it's a much more realistic take of like, I wasted all those people's lives on a bad tactical decision. But there was never he never calls into question whether or not like the death was like a necessary part of war. He also never says anything to imply that this is the first time he's lost anyone. So I think that even when death is being treated as like this big tragedy, it is still with the caveat of like, yeah, but it happens, and maybe that's just my interpretation, but I kind of get the sense that Leaf is kind of blaming himself more for like their lives were wasted on a strategy that did not work, rather than it being like an unnecessary sacrifice to begin with. But and mechanically, like I said, it gets like 75% of the way there. There's that instance later on where you have to sacrifice a unit or make the choice of struggling against this really, really difficult obstacle. But unfortunately, that's kind of held back. Oh, and the Valkyria staff also kind of gives this buffer of you can, because normally I would say in a game that has so few units, Iron Manning is not ideal and is heavily disincentivized, because when you have units that are this good and this few, and each unit is pulling so much weight, losing one can be. But with the Valkyria staff, if you're careful with your money and you do your inheritance well, getting the getting like units to be revived is actually not that difficult. So I think that the framework for it being interesting mechanically is there as well, but the autosave feature kind of ruins that. And I think that I'm glad the autosave feature exists. If it didn't, this game would be just an absolute nightmare to play in every conceivable way. It would be terrible. Probably like maybe the worst Fire Emblem game. I think the autosave is genuinely that big of a game changer that I think it would propel this from one of my personal favorites to being one of my least favorite in the series if it was not there. So I definitely do not think that they should not have put in the autosave. I just think that if you're trying to make a game where death is a core piece of it, and you want the player to have to deal with the sacrifices that they make and the mistakes and the lives that it costs them, having the ability to just go back from the beginning of the turn and fix that is kind of counterintuitive to that. So kind of mechanics are kind of at odds with each other there. So I think that this concept of death in Fire Emblem, both mechanically and narratively, is something that I'm going to come back to a lot, and that is a ripe fruit for discussion because there's a lot there to talk about. I mean, death has been a core concept in this series since its inception, and it's really interesting to see how it's changed over the years. So I have somehow managed to talk about this map for 30 minutes before the map has even actually started. So let's go ahead and get right into it. The first goal is to capture the Yied Shrine, meet up with Shannon, and then move downward to help Leaf. Um, Although at the same time, Leaf is also fighting his own battle down in the south. You control them, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. By the way, if you notice that anything sounds different, it's because I'm recording this section later and I'm outside. Spring is here. It's a gorgeous day out. Um, and so I just wanted to sit outside and work on this. And I think that's really funny because I recorded the bulk of the last episode in January. So we are yeah, it's been a hot minute, but hey, that's in the past now, right? So to start off, let's talk about some of these characters. Actually, no. First off, I want to talk about this music. This is probably my favorite map theme in the game. It might not be. There's a few really, really good ones. Chapter 3, I've already talked about being really good. I also really like Chapter 10 and also what was Endgame. Endgame is one that I really like. But this one is easily up there, probably top 3 for me. Um, you should. I mean, I'm going to put it in the episode. And you've already heard at this point, but you should go listen to more of it because I only usually put in like 10 or 15 seconds tops. So, getting back to the characters, we have a bunch to talk about here. Starting off, we have 5, and then we get, I believe, 3 more over the course of the map, maybe more. Let's start with Daisy and Shannon. Daisy is a thief. You'll have Patty if you paired Bridget and she survived. Um, Obviously, Patty's better just because she has better skills and the chance to inherit more items, especially money if you gave whoever her father is any money, and then she'll have more to spread around in this gen. That's pretty good generally. I think that's probably the best advantage of having Patty because otherwise, I mean, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Patty's not meant to be a combat unit. And if you're going to make a good combat unit out of Patty, you can probably make one out of Daisy too. I'm just double checking to see if she has any noteworthy skills or abilities. She has Miracle, but that's really it. They both join with the Sleep Sword, which is cool. It has a chance to put it has a chance to put enemies to sleep when you hit them. It's only a chance, it's not a guarantee, but it basically makes if anything, honestly, I would give it to someone else just because it's basically a guaranteed, depending on how willing you are to attempt the arena over and over again. It's basically a guaranteed victory in the arena. So if there's just a wall that a sword using unit just can't get past, um, just chuck the sleep sword on them. You'll have to repair it probably because it doesn't do a lot of damage, so you might end up breaking it uh, just in one round. But it doesn't actually break until the end of the combat, so you don't have to worry about it breaking like in the middle of the arena fight. So that's good. And then if you want to make a good combat unit out of Daisy or Patty, that's one way you can do it. But yeah, I mean, a thief's a thief is a thief. I'm not trying to say that like it's completely negligible the differences between her and Patty. But really, I can't really think of anything other than what I've already said. So it's I don't think it's super noteworthy. Um, but yeah, that's really all I have to say about her. Character wise, she seems funny. Um, she actually she's a little manipulative. We'll talk about more about that later. I can't really remember Patty's character super well. Um, but Daisy's definitely stands out to me here a little bit. I gotta go at some point in between bits of recording. I've started basically recording these like in chunks rather than doing it all at once. So in between recordings, I have to like go double check the script for anything that's noteworthy. But actually, I might as well just do that right now. Okay, yeah, I just looked into it a little bit, and Patty seems like pretty much the same as Daisy. I haven't noticed any notable differences, at least not right now. Maybe that'll change later on. I don't know. I actually noticed the conversation that I missed out on entirely.
So I'm glad that I went and checked because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to talk about that. I think that there's always going to be some stuff that I have to worry about falling through the cracks, but you know, I'm sure, honestly, there probably already has been stuff that's fallen through the cracks that was noteworthy that I just didn't talk about, but eh, it's not that big of a deal, I guess. But anyway, yeah, Daisy's kind of funny and a little manipulative, a strong word. But I'll talk more about that when we talk about some conversations later. Shannon joins with her, and Shannon is a swordmaster. He's pre-promoted. I think he might be the only male swordmaster in the game, if I'm not mistaken, because I think Ulster and his substitute and Holland all promote to hero. At least the only playable male swordmaster. There's probably some enemy only ones. He's really really good, especially when he gets his legendary weapon, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I mean, for a foot unit, his combat is ridiculous. He's like Era on steroids. Um, or Holland on steroids. He's just as dodgy. Well, not even. He's way way more dodgy. He does more damage. He hits. He's pretty accurate. He's just a great unit all around. If you use any foot unit, it should be Shannon because Shannon is really strong. As a character, we've already talked a little bit about him because he was around in Gen 1, kind of like Uifi. And I like him a lot. I think Shannon's honestly one of my favorite parts of this game. I think in Gen 1 he's really cute and really earnest and has a lot of personality that certain characters in this game just don't. So I think that it was great to see him come back. I think that that um gen the whole generational gap thing in this game would have a lot less weight if Shannon and Oifi weren't there. I think seeing those familiar faces and how these past 17 years have changed them, both for better and for worse, is a really interesting aspect of this game that I'm just really glad was put in. I think that if it was just the kids of the previous generation, it wouldn't have been nearly as cool. I haven't really gotten enough experience with him in Gen 2 to know how he is in Gen 2. I haven't played around enough with him to be sure. He seems cool though. I mean, he just seems kind of fun. Maybe a little overly serious, but not super so. I guess you could argue he's a little boring. He's not super interesting, but he has some fun exchanges with like Patty later on or Daisy. I think Seliph too. He has a good conversation with. Talk more about that later. And then on the southern part of the map, we have Leaf, Nana, and Finn. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Finn just because I've already talked a lot about him. I talked about him in Gen 1, and everything I said there pretty much applies here too. Um, and his character doesn't seem to be all that different. He really does still kind of fit into the loyal knight sort of archetype that and then that just kind of his loyalty has kind of moved from Quan to his son Leaf, and there's not really a whole lot else to say about him, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Maybe it'll change as we go forward in the story. I think he gets some screen time later when it comes to like stuff with Altena, so he'll be around a bit. We can talk more about him. Leaf is interesting. He is the Gen 2 equivalent of Lachesis in terms of gameplay. He is a prince, um, as opposed to a princess, which is what Lachesis was. And he is really, really bad. He has terrible stats. He can only use swords. He can't even heal, like the way Lachesis could. So he doesn't have access to that, like his own experience pool. He does have to fuck off, bird. He does have to steal experience from other people, or fight in the arena, which he's not always going to be able to do. Now that I've kind of talked about giving sword units the sleep sword to help them out in the arena, that might actually be a really good idea. He has the bargain band for me, so he'll be able to get access to like the pursuit ring and stuff, which will be nice. And then all that's going to be worth it because eventually he will promote to Master Knight just like Lachesis did, and he will have A rank in everything except light magic, which he will have C rank in. He has really good stats, a horse, and just is just a fantastic unit all around. So it's really a matter of like, do you think that having a phenomenal unit is worth putting up with um, garbage, basically? Um, it's like I mean, I don't really want to make this comparison because it's not at all fair. It's like comparing one of the best units in the game. Maybe not one of the best. I think Leaf is a little overrated as a gameplay unit. I think he's a lot of fun. I'm definitely using him, but I always hear him talked about as being like the best, one of the best units in Gen 2. I don't know about all that. I think that it's kind of hard to call him one of the best units in Gen 2 when you have monsters like Ares, which we'll talk about later. I think arguably Seliph is a lot better because he's in a similar situation, but is um, probably like for the average player, probably going to be better for the most part. I don't know. Maybe he is. I mean, he does promote to a mount, and having A rank staffs on a mount is a big deal. Only other character replicate capable of replicating that is a Fee who is Claude's daughter. I think I'm pretty sure that's the only. Well, and then obviously Lachesis. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass here a little bit. I just think that it's hard to say that even if this unit turns out really good, if you have to put up with so much garbage to get them there, especially since to get good items on him, you have to also not have them for the last two maps of Gen 1. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a I don't know what the right word is. I just don't think Leaf is as good as everyone else seems to. I think he's still good. I don't think he's a bad unit by any means. I just don't get the vibe from him that I think other people do. Maybe I'm just not seeing something. Maybe this is just a part of this game's meta that I'm not thinking of. But I don't know. There's a woodpecker sitting on a bird feeder nearby. He's trying to figure out how to get this food. He's just kind of shuffle around the side of the cage to duck his head in to get food. This is very entertaining. I'm very glad I decided to do this out here. All right. Uh, character wise, again, not enough really to say about him. Again, and also like with Finn, he gets more screen time later when Thracia and Altena come back into the picture. Right now, he's kind of lame, and that's a little bit hard for me to say. The downside of doing this outside is that there are cars, and I really hope that it's not picking up too badly all these birds in the background, but we'll see, I guess. What was I saying? Oh yeah, Leaf. I think Leaf is actually one of the best lords in the series if we're talking about his Thracia, like because Leaf is the main character of the next game in the series, so he gets a lot more screen time there, obviously, and he's a lot more interesting there. He goes through some really cool character development moments, and I'm gonna have a lot more to say about him when we get to that game. But for right now, he's kind of. I mean, I think there's some interesting moments where you find out that he finds out that all of his men are dead. Um, he has a really great scene with Seliph later that I'll talk about when we get there. It's like towards the end of the map. Well, I got it towards the end of the map. I guess you could get it theoretically pretty early, but I didn't. And then Nana is just the troubadour. She's a mounted healer. That's pretty good. Um, unless you made her dad someone who has good staff rank, like Claude, or actually, I think that's the only father that can boost her staff rank. Yeah. So she's the daughter of what's a Lachesis, and in my case that would be Beowulf. So she's actually going to be pretty strong. She has a good strength growth, and then I can't remember if she gets pursuit or not because I don't remember if that's Beowulf's personal skill or if it's a class skill of the Free Knight. But either way, she's gonna hit like a truck, believe it or not. I mean, she has pretty bad strength to start out, but and bad weapons too. But the real reason you come to her is you have someone who can use a staff. But the point I was trying to make is that um, she only has C stabs, so she's only going to be able to use like the worst stabs, uh, like heal and return. And I don't even think she can use mend. Oh, I could be wrong about that. I don't know what her staff rank is when she promotes. I guess I'll check that. Yeah, okay, so she still has C rank. when she promotes to paladin. But I mean, it's still nice to have. It's like, would you rather have like really good staff utility on a foot unit? In that case, use Lana or Mana or whoever you have, or do you want like like all right staff utility on a unit who can be more versatile and where they move? In that case, you're gonna want to use Nana. There's no reason to not use both, obviously, and especially in a game with no deployment limits. So I'm just gonna use both. Um, if you make Claude her dad, she can actually be really good because she'll have A ranks. Actually, no, no. Oh, I learned something new. I learned something new about this game. So I found out that um, having minor holy blood in a a weapon type. So like for example, the Bragi holy blood is associated with staves. I always thought that having minor holy blood boosted your staff rank to A in the associated weapon type. I was wrong. It turns out that it only boosts it by one rank. So if she has C at base, she would only have access to B. So that actually changes my conception of how to make characters good. And actually, what I said just a minute ago about having Claude as Fee's dad to boost her staff rank would not. Well, I mean, it would boost her staff rank as a Falcon Knight, but it would not boost it to A rank. It would boost it to, I believe, only C. I'm pretty sure, or B. I'm pretty sure she only has C at base. So that's a bummer. That means that the only mounted staff unit in the entire game is, well, Lachesis in Gen 1 and then Leaf in Gen 2. Mounted A rank staff unit. Um, which gives them even more of a niche, I guess. But yeah, I found that out because I was looking at Arthur, and Arthur has B rank Thunder, and I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. He should have A rank, but I looked into it, and no, he has C rank normally. Like if he did, well, not normally, but if Till2 wasn't his mother, which she always will be, but if she wasn't, if he didn't have the Torto Holy Blood, he would only have C rank, and so it gets boosted to B. So I learned that. I did not know that. Hopefully, I mean if you knew that already, hopefully you weren't making fun of me too badly. But now maybe if you were like me and didn't know that, you now know. So anyway, Nana's okay. I don't think she's anything to write home about. I think that she's just, I mean, Ethlyn, I think she's about as good as Ethlyn was, except around for an extra chapter, um, compared to her because she joins in like the second chapter of her generation, but is around for all of the rest of it. So, and Ethelyn's pretty good. Like I don't think she's great. I think she's good. So I think that you should definitely use her. And character wise, she's, oh man, I don't know anything about her. Maybe she'll be more interesting in Thracia. I know a lot of people like her in Thracia, but I think that's just because she's a fun gameplay unit in Thracia. Although I could be wrong. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to see if my opinion on her changes. But like she's has no interesting dialogue in this chapter. She's just kind of there, which is a bummer. Uh, I mean, she has a cute moment with Diarmuid, which we'll talk about later, but it doesn't really characterize her in any meaningful way. It's just like kind of sad, but yeah, we'll get there. So the first thing I did when the map started off proper is got Balmung back from Daisy. If you go and trigger a conversation with Shannon, you get Balmung back, and it's really cute and funny actually. Um, Daisy is like trying to get away with some treasure, and Shannon's like, "Hey, listen, um, I think I already talked about this a minute ago because like part of it starts before you actually get control of the characters, but eventually Shannon catches up to her and is like, "Hey, listen, I really need that sword back. It's like mine. It's my birthright." And she's like, "Wait, why was this in that shrine anyway?" And he was like, my dad died. My dad had it, and then he died in this area, so I guess they just took it." And she's like, "Wait, are you Prince Shannon?" And he says, "Yeah, I am." And she's like having like a big fangirl moment. She thinks that he's so cool. I think she literally says something about being his fan, which I think is funny. Um, but yeah, she's like super excited and she's like, "Okay, yeah, you can have it back." And he's like, all right, cool, thanks." And Shannon gets his Balmung. This gives him plus 20 speed and plus 20 skill, or maybe plus 10 skill. I don't remember. Either way, it makes him basically unkillable. I shouldn't say that. You can get unlucky, but it's it gives him a massive boost to his avoidance. Now, when you have this, it's honestly, and this is what I do every single time because it's pretty much objectively the right call, especially in a game where you can reset on the fly. There are some dark mages guarding the shrine, and I mean you can't capture it anyway until Seliph gets there because he needs to seize it. But eventually, this guy guarding the castle is going to get his long range tome back, at which point it is going to be much harder to beat him because you're not going to be able to approach him as easily. So I always just run up and kill all the guys with Shannon and then just wait for Seliph to get there. It's a little boring because it takes some it just you end up just waiting around a lot of the time. And it requires some luck because I think he dies in like 2 or 3 hits and they all have like a 30% chance to hit him. So it's not like it's impossible for him to die. But if you get reasonably lucky, you might have to reset a couple times, but you'll be fine. And yeah, you'll just be able to capture that really easily. That's what I do pretty much all the time. Oifi and Diarmid have a conversation, um, and Diarmid mentions that he has a sister, in Leinster, and he's excited to see her. And they have a cute interaction where he's like, "Oh well, I'll make sure that you get to her safely, and we'll do some training." And he gets a stat boost out of it. It's nice. It characterizes Diarmid pretty well, as being really like eager and cares about his sister a lot. I don't know. It's nice. What I really like about this map is how it forces you to engage in multiple locations. And this is something that I've talked about before as being one of my favorite parts of any map is when they have enemies coming at you from multiple directions, your army's spread thin, and you have to be strategic in how you approach. I think this map is a little bit less interesting in that regard than some of the best maps in later games, just because I think that part of what makes those maps so fun is that part of the strategy comes from moving characters and items around depending on where you need them. So if you have like some wyverns on one side of the map, but your character who has the Worm Slayer starts on the other side of the map, you have to figure out, okay, how do I get either the sword or the character to the other side in time to help out without like crippling what's going on the other side. That's not really a factor here because other than Fee, no one can really, or I guess Femina if you are Femina, if you're using her, no one can actually even get to Leaf and Nana and Finn, and they can't trade any items around, obviously. So it's pretty much a moot point in that regard. But what I do like about this is that your Finn and Nana, or sorry, Leaf and Nana are pretty garbage. I mean Nana can heal, but otherwise they're not really doing a whole lot in terms of combat. And you do have to save villages, so you're going to be relying a lot on Finn. And if you didn't use Finn for whatever reason, my very first playthrough, I was playing blind and I did not use Finn. So I got to this map and all of my characters were garbage. Um, but you're going to be relying heavily on Finn. He's kind of like a little mini Jagan, as stupid as that sounds, but it is it's like a microcosm of what the Jagan archetype usually is. It's like you're a heavy hitter carrying garbage units through a tough situation. They can still do things to help out, especially Leaf if you want to get him some experience, can find places to contribute. And then of course you have to save some villages down there, so there's a lot to do with not a whole lot of resources, and it's interesting to try to figure that out. On the upper side of things, things are a bit less interesting, but you can have your units split up a little bit. You can have Seliph go help out Shannon, and then all your other units can go down, or maybe you can have multiple units go help Seliph. Whatever you want to do. Um, and it's I don't know. It gave me more to think about than the average. I keep moving away from my microphone. I don't know how that's going to sound, but um, it gives me more to think about than the average Fire Emblem 4 map, which isn't saying much. I don't think the maps in this game are very good on average, if I'm being completely honest. Not just because of the size, although I don't care for that much either. I think that it's a matter of just they don't challenge you in an interesting way. They don't tax your strategic mind. They don't uh really make you think about resource management. They just make you think, okay, how many of my big legendary weapon guys can I throw at this situation? Um, and how fast can I make things die? That's not always true. That's not giving the game enough credit, I think, if I were to say that that was always the case. In maps like this, obviously there's an exception, and then of course, in earlier maps there are individual instances where other units have to contribute as well, and maybe, especially before you get legendary weapons, one unit might not be the answer to everything, but it definitely feels that way sometimes. So that's definitely something that's been sitting with me a lot as I've been playing this game is really I just don't find the maps to be that engaging. I think the gameplay in the maps is really good. I really like the gameplay systems that are here. I've talked a lot about that, how I like the gold system and the item management system. I just don't think the game really makes you it's a lot of macro strategy in terms of inheritance and figuring out what items are going to go on which characters for them to get the most use. But on a micro level, on a moment to moment gameplay level, you're really not doing a whole lot of decision making. And I think that it's fine to have a game that focuses on that macro experience. Um, I just don't know if I would like to see it become a serious trend, and it hasn't. So that's good, I guess. I think it's an okay experience for one game, but it's yeah, I'll leave it at that because I've talked a little bit about this before. I'm sure I'll talk about it more in the future, but this map's fun though. I like that it's one of the few instances of having to think on that micro level and make good strategic decisions in the moment, um, without even if it doesn't really reach the highs of later games in that regard. There's a cutscene that we see that takes place in Darna, which is kind of the middle uh, castle in this map. There's a couple castles below it and a couple castles above it, and we meet. Hi, oh hi puppy. We meet Ares and Layla, and Ares looks a hell of a lot like Eldegon, so you'll probably figure out who he is right away. But he confirms it immediately as well by saying that he's heard that Seliph is on his way and that he wants to kill Seliph because Seliph is the son of the man who killed his father. And Layla has to basically say no. That's probably not what happened. Wasn't your dad a knight and wasn't Sigurd a knight? They probably just had to fight because their countries made them fight. That's kind of just what knights do. And he just kind of gets mad and well, actually no, he doesn't even get mad. He's kind of like, yeah, I guess you're right. This is I'm gonna talk more about this. I'm gonna have a whole rant about this later, but this is a sneak preview I'll give you right here. I think Ares' character is fucking garbage. I love Ares. I think that he is maybe the most fun gameplay unit in the game. I think he's a ton of fun to use, one of my favorites. Um, but as a like in terms of how he is written, I think he is really, really bad. I don't think he's like a bad person or anything like that. I don't think he's like a shitty um one note character, I guess. I think there are definitely way worse characters. I definitely also think that he is a very inconsistently written character, which is kind of something I complained about with his dad, ironically enough. But Ares takes that and dials it up to 11. It's really bad, but again, we'll get there when we get there. Once Seliph and Shannon meet up, they have a conversation where Shannon almost casually says like, "Hey, yeah, I heard you took back my country for me. Thanks, pal." And they just have a cute interaction. Um, I don't. I guess Shannon uh says to Seliph that he's getting some muscle on him, um, and that he kind of takes a second to reflect on something. We don't really get to know what it is, but I imagine he's kind of thinking about maybe Sigurd and how Seliph is comparing to Sigurd at this point in his life. And it's just a really cute moment, and it makes you stop and remember that like yeah, we didn't see most of it, but or any of it, I guess. But Shannon pretty much raised Seliph along with Oifi, and I'm sure like obviously the help the villages that they were hiding in, the people of the villages that they were hiding in. Um, Shannon's been one of the most consistent figures in his life. I mean, other than Oifi, again, probably the closest thing to a father figure he's had, at least that we get to see. I don't think that we never get to have that scene where he goes into a village and it's like, oh, it's that guy that raised me for 10 years, and it's just a random generic village portrait. That would be really funny, but no, it's cute. It's wholesome, and I like Shannon a lot. It's a great interaction. So this next part is a detail, I guess not a detail, but a section of the story that has sparked some discussion and some controversy is maybe the wrong word, but at least not in the way that we typically think of it. Like it hasn't really sparked any um outside people to be like, whoa, what's going on with Fire Emblem? It has sparked some discourse in the community, and it's when Seliph captures the Yied Shrine, and we get a glimpse into what the lifestyle of the Loptyr cultists really is like. And basically it tries to at I guess this isn't really the 11th hour, but it's well past their introduction for sure. Introduce this idea that maybe they're not so bad after all. Maybe they're just sort of being pushed um into this lifestyle by the outside world. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I don't want to apply too much real world equivalency here. I think you can for sure. This isn't really the show. This isn't really what I want that show to. That isn't really what I want the show to be, though. And I hate when people say, "Oh, you shouldn't make video games political," because really, usually what they mean by that is don't say things that I don't like in the context of a video game. Um, and it usually a lot of the time has to do with like the rights of women and minorities and transsexual people. Um, and people don't like that, so they say that things that make me uncomfortable in video games is making it political. And I hate that. I hate that a lot, and that is a conversation for a totally different day. However, I am definitely of the mindset that I don't want to. I've used the term neo Nazis um, as sort of shorthand for what this is, because I don't think that they are. I don't think that the Loptyr cultists are similar to neo Nazis. I think that some of the rhetoric that is used to describe them here is similar to some uh, real world justification of um, Nazism and general like what's the term, hate, and I don't know. The point I'm trying to make here is there are definitely real world parallels that you can draw here. And in that context, I think that what is being said here is slightly problematic. Um, but at the same time, I don't super care. This was a game that came out in the 90s in a completely different culture, um, both from what ours is now, or I guess I should say what mine is now, what mine was back then, even though I wasn't alive back then, and even from what Japan's culture was like at that time. It's a game from a completely different point in history, and I don't necessarily know how well you can hold it up to that level of scrutiny. But at the same time, when you hear stuff like, "Oh, they became child murdering Satanists because the world was just so mean to them," it makes me raise an eyebrow and say, is that really the angle we're taking with this? Is that really what this game is going to try to tell me is the real problem here, is that the child murdering Satanists weren't treated well enough. And it's sort of like a chicken and egg scenario because I don't know what came first and what made what worse. It's implied that at first the Loptyr cult didn't really do anything wrong. And this is sort of something I've questioned before of like what is the Loptyr cult really? Is it people who engage in these horrific acts, or is it just people who are descended from the original Loptyr cultists? And the game kind of tries to push that second one of like, oh, um, they're they were only persecuted because of the blood in their veins, um, and they were treated so badly. And I can definitely see that as being a motivator for some people to turn to a solution that they feel is justified in the world that they have been presented as being this cruel, hateful, spiteful world against these people who have done nothing wrong. Um, I can get that angle of it. I definitely, if that's what the game is trying to say, I can see that as being fine. Um, but there's also a really because we never, other than Deirdre and I guess Arvis, kind of, we never meet anyone and their kids. We never meet anyone who is not evil, who is a Loptyr cultist. Not in this game, at least. In the next game we do actually we get a playable unit who is a Loptyr cultist. I believe is his story. Um, so I don't know. There's a lot to unpack here, and it's not. It's a villain backstory that I think is excessively rushed and not well thought out. Um, and is maybe a bit less compelling that I think people give it credit for. Um, but I'm gonna get off my soapbox now because I don't think that this really bears this much discussion when it was clearly such an afterthought um, in the story. I mean, afterthought is maybe a bit harsh, but it definitely doesn't feel like they were like trying to make the Loptyr cult out to be like it doesn't feel like this was their goal with the Loptyr cult. It didn't feel like they said, all right, or Kaga, I guess I should say. It doesn't feel like Kaga said, all right, I want to make a story where the villains are super sympathetic and tragic and all of their actions are perfectly understandable when you view them through this lens, even if they are evil in the end. Instead, it feels like he made this generic kind of Satan worshiping cult and then tack this on as kind of like a oh well as just some intrigue to the story. I mean, I have no idea what his thought process was when writing this game. Of course, I could never know that, but that's just the implication I get. If it was intended to be something deeper, either content was cut or it was really just not as interesting as he thought it was going to be because I it's not even really clear to me still about what is and isn't part of the Loptyr cult, um, and what is meant to be being said here. And maybe that's part of the point, right? Maybe the game just doesn't want to spell these things out explicitly to me. It's not like I'm saying I don't want to have to think for myself. Maybe they want you to think and come to your own conclusions on whether or not the Loptyr cult is justified in what they're doing. Or I guess I don't think anyone would argue that they're justified. I think more is it like how understandable is it? Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a mess, and I don't think it was as compelling as it could have been. I don't know how much people stand the Loptyr cult. I don't hear a lot of people talking about like, wow, you know, the my favorite villain faction in the series is the Loptyr cult because they're just so de- they're so depressing and their backstory is so sad. It actually reminds me a lot of what they tried to do with the Awakening villains. Um, the difference there though is that there's a couple that I mean you know I maybe shouldn't be saying that FE13 did something better in its story than FE fucking 4, but I'm gonna say it because I think that if you want to take a look at a game that did this concept kind of well, not great, but kind of well, FE13 does, because the plot there is that Plegia is the main villain faction for the first part of that game, and they do some really messed up, horrible shit. They even have cultists who kidnap people and do evil things. And the plot there is that Crom's dad did horrible, horrible things to the Plegians, and this is sort of their retaliation against that. So I think if you wanna do this kind of thing well, you could take a couple pointers from FE13 because not only do the main characters have a stake in this. I mean, that wasn't like some long ancestor or like a nebulous like these people did something. That is the father of the main character of the game. That's a big deal. That's like if you found out in Gen 1 that Byron was like going around slaughtering innocent people just because they were descended from Loptyr cultists. That's what the equivalent of that is. Um, and that I feel like that would have made this have a lot more weight and a lot more intrigue. But then I think also part of it is that the face of Plagueia in that game, Gangrel. I don't know how popular of an opinion this is, but I think Gangrel is one of the best villains in the series. I don't care much for FE13's plot. I think that it's a very, very bad story on the whole, but I think that the characters in that game, um, both the main characters and then some villains. Actually, maybe I even shouldn't even say some villains. I think most of them are pretty bad, but I think Gangrel is a genuinely fantastic villain. He's full of personality, full of character, and has a clear motivation and purpose, and it's just great. He's just a funny dude. He makes jokes about farting, and has this and when Crom goes on his hero speech, he's like, "All right, are you done? Can I vomit now?" It's great. It's just fantastic. I love Gangrel, and there's nothing like that for the Loptyr cult. There is nothing. The closest thing the Loptyr cult has to levity is this guy who lost his motherfucking bolting tome in his huge palace. Like, dude, I'm still not over that. But no, Manfroy is not a good villain. He's not an interesting villain. He has no personality. Arvis isn't really a part of the Loptyr cult, and even if he was, I mean, I think he's a good villain, but I don't think he's fun or interesting. I think, or well, I guess he's interesting, but I don't think he's interesting in the sense of he's like a good personality villain. I just think that he has interesting motivations. I don't know. I just think that there is exactly one thing. Maybe there's more. Maybe I'll think more about this as I go on with both games. But I think it's funny that this is the one thing that FE13 arguably did better than FE4. I probably won't be saying that again. I probably made a lot of people angry saying it now because FE13 is one of the most panned games in the series when it comes to its narrative, and this is one of the most beloved. But I genuinely feel this way. I think that um, this is just not a good way of handling villains, and I think that the Loptier cult is a not a good antagonist organization. I don't think any of the characters that come from this group are good or interesting, and I don't think that this backstory adds anything meaningful to the narrative other than. I mean, it gives Seliph more to think about. I guess this is kind of the chapter of the game where Seliph learns a lot of lessons, and in fact, after he sees this, uh, Lewin kind of says the theme of the game, or at least the theme of this section of the game, out loud to Seliph, and he says, "Good and evil can't easily be reduced. Good and evil can't be easily reduced to such simple black and white ideals." And yeah, I mean that's what the game is trying to tell us here, right? But it's is it really trying to say that um, they I think it's trying to say that like not all op tier cultists are bad, or like they're not inherently evil. They were kind of pushed in this direction by things that happened to them. But there's nothing in the game that illustrates that other than this one cutscene. It's not that I remember. Maybe there's more later, but not in this chapter. That's for sure. I don't know. I'm done. I'm gonna stop ranting now because I could go on about this for a really long time. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. This is kind of the part in the game where the Loptyr cult gets a spotlight and is discussed in detail more so than any other part in the game. So I think that this is probably the best section to air my grievances with them as a concept and yeah, get that out there. So thanks for listening to my TED talk. I have to stop recording now because I gotta go do other stuff. But um, yeah, I will. I'll be back with the next sections of the map at some point, probably. There is actually a line here that Lewin has that I really like, and I'll say that real quick because I forgot about it, and I think that this kind of illustrates more maybe what the game is going for. And he says, "Hate the evil which lurks in us all, not the individual." I don't know if that's an exact quote or if that's me paraphrasing, but that's something similar to what he says. And obviously, what he kind of means by that is, or what I interpret that to mean at least, is everyone has the capacity for great good or great evil inside of them. No one is born with an innate talent or desire to do good or to do evil. Um, Now, while I agree with that, and I think that that is a great message overall, because I think that's 100% true, it's a little bit counteracted by the fact that the main villain of this game, Julius, was literally born evil because of his bloodline. And I think that if you're going to have a game where you're trying to say, oh, anyone is capable of evil and you shouldn't hate the individual, hate the, or even the group, hate what they represent, and challenge that rather than, hating all people who, hating someone who does bad, um, hate bad wherever it may be. If you're going to tell that story, that's fine, that's great, I love it. Maybe don't also put it in a story where, and then also, characters like Deirdre and Julia are like these pure maidens who have the power of God within them and can smite down evil. It's like I don't I think those two things kind of run counter to each other. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just not conceptualizing it properly, and maybe it's actually genius and I just don't get it. Um, Feel free to call me an idiot at email me and tell me your thoughts at turnwheel podcast at gmail.com, and I will be sure to read it all. Um, Please don't call me an idiot. I'm very sensitive.
After capturing the Yied shrine, Seliph has a conversation with Daisy and also Patty, but Daisy. I'm not going to keep doing this. But it's funny because there's such big gaps between when I record that I forget that I've already established that I'm not going to repeat myself on this subject over and over again. But yes, Daisy and Seliph have a conversation here. It's pretty mundane for the most part. It's funny. This is where I was kind of saying that Daisy kind of shows a little bit of a manipulative side, where she gets all. I mean, I'm kind of maybe reading into it. I'm pretty sure the implication here is that she's full of shit. But what happens is that, um, well, I guess I should lead with what Selef says. So Daisy's like, "Hey, I want to join your army. I want to be with Shannon. I'm a thief. I can get money for you." And Selef has a really interesting line here, where I mean, maybe interesting is the wrong word, but he says, "I've no use for money tainted by a thief," and I think that that's a cool line because it shows that he's like this sort of moral paragon. I think it's funny. It's gonna be funny moving forward to see kind of how each lord interacts with the thief of the games. Because every Fire Emblem game has a thief. I think I don't know. There are a few maybe that don't, but I'm pretty sure they all do. I think maybe Shadows of Valentia doesn't have one, or Gaiden by extension. Anyway, um, this just seems like the generic good guy answer, which it is. But I think that it will be funny in retrospect to see because I genuinely can't remember any other time
where a thief has been talking to a lord, and the lord's just like, "Fuck off! I don't want your money. I don't want our money to be stolen." I'm pretty sure most of the time the lords are just like, "Yeah, let's go with it, whatever." Um, and again, usually, I'm assuming that it's sort of a thing where if they do put up any sort of resistance, they're talked into it by the advisor. I think Soren, for example, like Ike is kind of like unsure of what to do with Volk in Path of Radiance, and Titania and Soren kind of have a conversation. You actually have a choice. We'll get to this obviously in later down the line, but you have a choice of whether to recruit Volk in that game. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, my point is that Selef kind of talks himself into it a little bit, or I guess Daisy talks him into it by getting really sad and sort of crying and saying like, "Oh yeah, my money's stolen, but it's because they stole the money from the common people, and I'm just taking back what's rightfully belongs to the people." And she's like, bawling her eyes out. She's like sniffling, like it looks like she's about to start crying. And Self's kind of like, "Oh, okay, okay, I got it. Fine, you can join us. We can, we'll work it out." And she gets, immediately does a complete 180, gets really happy, and that's kind of why I'm assuming that it's her kind of putting on a front. I definitely think that's supposed to be the implication. I'm doubting like basic storytelling instincts. Like I'm pretty sure most people will read that and not even give a second thought on whether it's genuine or not. Um, in that it's not, and it's very obvious that it's not. But I also don't want to make anyone mad by assuming anything about a character that they like. So I try to cover all my bases here. So after this, the next stop on the road is Fort Melgan, which is way, 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 way down to the south. I had a few people going up to help. Well, I mean, not even really help Seliph, but Shannon cleared out all the enemies, and I was just having Seliph go up to capture the Yied shrine, while everyone else moved down to get into position to cross into the area that was blocked off before. Um, so at this point, Melgan turns into our enemy, and it cuts to Darna, which is sort of between. It's been neutral up to this point, and it's between the Yied Shrine and Melgan. You have to pass it on your way there, and the Lord there is kind of like, all right, well, we'll wait for them to get past, and then we'll jump them from behind. But while this is happening, he meets Layla, and he starts to, kind of make advances on her, and she's very uncomfortable. Ares comes in and sort of um, puts a stop to it, and he says like, "Hey, stop doing that." He's a lot more edgy. I don't remember why. I might go look up the script in a minute, but I have in my notes Ares is so edgy with four Y's, which he is, and we'll get to that. But I'm not sure what I was specifically referencing here, so I'm gonna go double check that. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna read you. I don't think this is the line from Project Naga, but this is the line from the wiki, which I think is a not an exact translation of what's in Project Naga, but it's a lot closer than what's on Serenus Forest. So he says, "You all see my sword, correct? I trust I need not introduce the demon blade. Beware, for Mistletoe craves the blood of men. Who dares come forth and slake its thirst?" And that's like something that Owain would say as a parody line. Like, say what you will about Awakening, and I'll have plenty to say about Awakening. I've said a lot about Awakening in this episode, even, but um, there is a character in Awakening, if you're not familiar, named Owain, who is sort of he's like kind of like a parody um of the edgy sort of Nevere type character, which I mean, not in terms of gameplay, but in terms of character, I think you could argue that Ares fills that role pretty well. That's something that Awakening does on another note. Since we're not going to get to Awakening for a very long time, I kind of want to talk a little bit about it here because this is something I really like about it. Um, a lot of the characters, especially a lot of the child characters, are sort of deconstructions of the traditional Fire Emblem tropes in a way that people praise Three Houses a lot for, but I never really see people talk about it with Awakening. Um, so maybe that's just a pattern that I've noticed that isn't actually there, or I think even if it is there, some characters do it better than others. So, but again, another time, another place. I just wanted to kind of get that out there because it's something that I think is cool. Anyway, that line is so over the top and just Like it has to be like at least partially meant as comedy, right? Like I don't think there's anyone who can read this and legitimately think, "Man, Ares is so cool." I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that judgmental, right? Like maybe there are people who do feel that way. Um, but I don't see it, man. I really don't. Um, anyway, so once he reveals that he has Mistletoe and that he's Eldagon's son, the Lord of Darna kind of backs off and is like, all right, yeah, we won't mess with you. So on the way to Melgen, nothing really happens. It's kind of a dangerous approach since there are some ballista and at least the boss, I think maybe a couple others have bolting, which makes it hard to get close, but you get there eventually and you capture it. The boss there is called Ishtar, who I believe is Ishtar's brother. Ishtar becomes a fairly important character in this game and the next game, and is a very popular character in the fan base. She's in Heroes and everything. I don't think Ishtar is in Heroes, which just goes to show. I mean, to be fair, he's also not that important in this game. But what's notable about him is that he's kind of like is kind of supposed to be like a little bit of a good guy. Like he seems reminiscent of like Yohalva and Yohalvir from the last chapter, in that he is doing the wrong thing and fighting for the wrong army, but he is like at heart a good guy and holds things back from being a lot worse than they would be if they were unchecked. I think that's kind of the impression that we're supposed to get from him, but again, he's not very fleshed out, so we don't really get to see very much of him. At this point, also Larcy and Shannon have a conversation together that you can get, I think, immediately, like it's technically as soon as you start the map, but I didn't get it until here because Shannon was up there and Larcy was down here, whatever. Although I should revise my wording a little bit because not only did I not get it, at the beginning of the map, I didn't get it at all. I wasn't paying attention, and I wasn't thinking that this would happen. But Larce and Johalvir got married before we could have that conversation between Shannon and Larce. But I looked it up, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you get, I believe it's two strength. Yeah. Okay. So it's plus two strength and then 100 love points. The conversation itself is pretty not notable. It's just like he kind of, they say hi to each other and they you know do some like training or whatever. But I didn't get it because Yohavir was too good at getting into Lars's pants, I guess, which is funny because I mean I know they have like a lot of like history together or whatever, or they're established as being sort of romantic interests. But she hates him pretty much in the. This is kind of something that I really wish that FE4 had supports, just because you don't really get to see that relationship development. It happens all off screen. You have to infer a lot of it, which is fine. That's not bad. I just would have loved to see sort of their relationship develop and her kind of come around to realizing that he's not so bad. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because this is, I mean, I'm assuming that this is where most people are going to get it because Shannon, there's no reason to have Shannon come down. There's really no reason to have Larce go up, so you're probably just going to get it here. Selef seems sad about killing Ishtar just because, again, it seems like he doesn't think that it had to happen. Lewin gives him a little bit of another lesson here. Again, this is the chapter of Selef learning lessons from usually Lewin. So Lewin just kind of talks about how sometimes, regardless of what you may personally feel or what the enemy may seem like to you, at the end of the day, war is war, and you have to kill the enemy if you want to come out on top. And Ishtar clearly was not hesitating to kill him. I really hope that Yohavir wasn't standing around for that because that would probably be pretty awkward. But I mean, I guess he did defect, so you know he wasn't the enemy anymore. But still, and Lewin kind of says, "All right, it's time to move on to Leinster." And at this point, you're caught between a rock and a hard place because Darna realizes that they sort of missed their chance. They were going to attack you while you were attacking Melgen, but they were too slow, and now they have to come at you from behind after you've already captured it. So the Lord, Bramzel is his name, instructs his mercenary leader, the guy in charge of Ares, to go and attack. And Layla kind of tells Ares that she doesn't want him to leave. And he kind of gives some backstory about how he was raised by this guy since he was a kid. And Layla says that he's just using you. You're like a tool to him. And Ares is like, no, that's not true, and she gets mad. If I said Lean, I meant to say Layla. I'm reading the script a little bit here, and it says Lean in the script because it just defaults to the regular kids, but I got Layla. I want to make that clear. And then Manster, no, Ulster, which is the castle that is attacking Leinster at the moment, the one that Leaf, Nana, and Finn have sort of been defending against, he launches an attack on Seliph as well. So you're kind of caught between the north and the west here. But before the northern army can do anything, there's a cutscene where Ares is kind of talking to this mercenary leader, and the mercenary leader kind of lets it slip that, like, hey, you don't really expect him to just leave this dancer girl alone, right? Like, as now that you're gone, he's probably, messing with her again. And Ares gets mad and is like, hey, you knew this was going to happen. Why didn't you say anything? And he's just says, well, because I don't care. Just don't, it's she's just a girl. Like, forget about her. It doesn't matter. And he gets super mad and decides that he's going to attack. He decides that he's going to turn traitor and attack the mercenary group. There's a lot to unpack here, and I don't know if I want to get into it right now. I think I will. I think I'll just unpack Ares right now because well, no. There's one more thing that we need to do. Ares turns blue at this point, and Seliph can go and talk to him, and they have a conversation that is interesting. So Seliph goes up to talk to Ares, and they have a brief exchange about who their fathers were. Ares knows already, and Seliph kind of has to be told that Ares is the son of Eldagon, and they're fighting each other. Or well, Ares is getting ready to like kill Seliph, like right then and there. He's like, "Let's go, let's fight." And Seliph's like, listen, our fathers were like best friends. They had to kill each other, but that was just because they were, just pushed into opposite sides of the war, and they still cared for each other. They were still friends. And Ares is like, that's not true. My dad and your dad were like mortal enemies. And Seliph is like, all right, well, why don't you come join my army and we can talk this out later? And Ares says, sure. Um, I don't know really where to begin with Ares because I think that everything about this is just a mess. We'll start with his gameplay because that's a lot easier to talk about. Ares is one of the best characters in the game. Personally, I think you could argue with me on this because there's one other contender. But I think that if you have poorly planned out inheritance, like if you're playing blind, for example, or if you're doing like some kind of challenge run where you give everyone shitty items to pass down, I would make an argument that Ares is the best character in Gen 2 because the major frontrunners for that spot are Seliph and Leaf, and both of those characters, obviously, if you don't give them good inheritance, take a lot longer to get going. They're footlocked. They have a lot of issues, so they're just they're a lot worse off. I think the only other character that gives Ares a run for his money in this regard is Oifi. I think that obviously Oifi is a static character, so he's pretty idiot proof. I think that Ares is maybe slightly better, but since Oifi has a big availability lead, it kind of puts him over the edge. It's kind of up to your interpretation, and obviously it doesn't matter. Most people are going to plan out their inheritance to the point where Seliph is going to be the best character in the game, unquestionably. But I think what makes Ares so interesting is that he's so much fun to use. And that's like a subjective thing. I'm going to talk about why I feel that way. First of all, he's on a mount, which, already is like, all right, you're good, you're in. That's like the first step of being like serviceable is either you are on a mount or you promote into a mount, and are able to get access to the resources you need to promote to that mount quickly. Ares starts on a mount, and he also joins with a incredibly powerful personal weapon called the Mistletoe. It's a holy weapon. Obviously, its might is really, really high, but I think what makes it even more fun, and what makes it personally my favorite holy weapon in the game, is that it grants you the critical skill. So it's like a killer bow, basically. It lets you get critical hits, which not everyone can do, and it also boosts your skill by 20%. Or sorry, I should say 20 base flat increase to your skill, which means that your crit rate always at a minimum is 20%. And that's in a hypothetical world where Ares has zero skill, but that's obviously not true. Ares is a static character, so these base stats will never change. He has a 12 skill base, so already 32 skill, right? Promotion gives him. Does he not get an HP growth? What? The promo bonuses on the wiki aren't labeled, so I don't know. I'm pretty. It looks like it's +3 skill. So that's already like as soon as he promotes, he's going to have 35% chance to crit. He has a 20% chance to grow skill, which isn't very high, but occasionally it'll happen. He'll be rocking like us, and then obviously if you get enough kills with it, you'll get it up to you can realistically by the end of maybe like chapter 8 or 9 have a 100 kill Mistletoe if you use him a lot, which isn't unreasonable because he's really good, which would give you approximately a 80% chance to crit every time you attack. And I'm not saying like that's, end game potential is not the worth of a character. Obviously, I'm not saying that he's good because of that 80% crit rate because that's not something you're going to have for a long time. I'm just saying it makes him a lot of fun to use, in my opinion. And I think that he's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people. As a character, I think that Ares is a mess. He is. I complained a little bit about Eldegon being kind of wishy-washy and inconsistently written, kind of changing his values and his beliefs on a dime. And I think that that was a little bit harsh in retrospect. I think that a lot of what I said is true and accurate, but I think maybe I wasn't giving him enough credit and kind of selling him short based on the fact that he just the context of the game doesn't let him get fleshed out very much. It doesn't flesh out his thought process as much as it maybe should have to make that clearer. But I have no problems saying that about Ares. So let's quickly run through what Ares' thought process here. We don't know why, but he believes that Seliph or that Sigurd and Eldegon were like mortal enemies. Now I'm going to assume that's what this mercenary leader who grew up, he grew up with and was raised by told him, which means that he was never exposed to the information from like legends or tales, even though pretty much, I mean, Layla is a random girl who is, I mean, has no real connection to anyone with holy blood. Even Lean, I mean, is Sylvia's daughter, but doesn't know her, and I don't believe was raised by anyone with any sort of connection to them. So this seems to be like a fairly common knowledge, like legend that Sigurd and Eldegon were best friends, and they were tragically torn apart by their countries. Ares didn't hasn't like learned that in the many years of being alive, and being told. I mean, he knows enough to know that his dad was Eldegon and that he has this Mistletoe, and he seems to know a little bit about what his dad did, but not anything about this his best friend. All right, already kind of stretching my suspension of disbelief a little bit, but it's fine. Like sometimes you need to make contrivances happen for the sake of conflict in the story. I get that. It's not a big deal. So he is stationed at this place in Darna and meets Lean or Layla, and Layla tells him that that he's wrong and that Seliph or that Sigurd and I keep mixing up the names. Sigurd and Eldegon were really good friends, and Ares is wrong about this, and Ares doesn't believe her. And I think her tone in this is kind of weird too. At least in the Project Naga patch, she's kind of like laughing about it, like he's being silly. Again, kind of evidence to this idea that maybe his character is supposed to be a little comedic in how over the top edgy he is, but that's just me. He doesn't believe her, and yet with no evidence or no real even like attempt at like Seliph trying to change his mind, he just kind of goes along with what Seliph says. Like all Seliph says is basically the same thing that Layla says. And I guess maybe you could say that Layla put the seed of doubt in his mind, but that, I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe Layla kind of made him think like, "Oh, wait, have I been living a lie this whole time?" And then Seliph convinced him that, okay, maybe I deserve to give this some more thought. And that is the most generous interpretation of this that I can give it. it's not indicated anywhere in the story that that's what's going on, but maybe we're supposed to infer that that's what's happening, right? I still don't think that that's necessarily good, just because, like, again, why did it take so long for anyone to even present him with the possibility that that was true? And also, on that note, why would the mercenary leader lie about that? Unless he knew he was going to have to fight Seliph at some point. But then, like, how would he know that, first of all? Why was he personally, did he even, there's so many questions here. Like, how deep in is this mercenary leader? Did he know who Sigurd was? Did he know that Seliph was alive and that he was raising an army, and that, and keep in mind that Ares has been with this guy since he was so young. He would have had to know all this stuff really early. Why would he be thinking this long term? And this is all based on an assumption that the game never tells us, which is that this guy lied to Ares about what his dad did. I don't know why he would do that or how he would know any of this. And it just takes one, like, pestering from Seliph to say, "Hey, our dads were actually best friends." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'll." I mean, he doesn't believe it. He's kind of just like, "All right, well, I'll come with you just to get a sense of, like, if this is true or not, and if it's not true, I'll kill you." And this part I don't actually mind because it makes sense for Ares. He kind of just killed the entire mercenary company that he'd been a part of for a really long time. He doesn't really have anywhere else to go. I'm sure he could find somewhere. He could probably be a mercenary himself. But, like, in terms of you know, he doesn't have anything that he's leaving behind anymore that would prevent him from doing this. I get that. Fair enough. I just think that he joins up a little bit too quickly, and is pacified a little bit too quickly. I think maybe if you had a era situation where maybe Ares was red and you had to, like, get past him, recruit Layla or Lean first, and then she convinces him to join, I think that would have made a lot more sense. I'm spending a lot of time talking about this, and I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I just, these little things like this bother me, especially when the entire point of this is to get into the nitty gritty of these games and their stories. I think that stuff like this is, you know, they could have done something better. They have in this game, so I think it's a fair criticism to make. While all this is happening in the north, Bloom is sending armies from his castle in the east to attack Seliph, and among them is a girl named Tinny. Now, Tinny is Teal'c's daughter, Arthur's sister, and you can recruit her by having him talk to her. And you find out a little bit about Teal'c's story after the war. Essentially, what happened is that Teal'c went back to Selyse after the war ended, and I think that in all of her lover conversations in chapter 5, she says something about going to Selyse. So she goes back to Selyse and raises Tinny and Arthur there for a little while. At some point, Teal'c and Tinny are captured by Bloom and brought back to his castle, where they're treated very, very badly. Teal'c, in particular, is treated horribly to the point where Tinny says that she never saw in her whole life Teal'c laugh or smile, and she died basically miserable the whole time. Arthur, and Tinny was treated pretty badly as well. Not as bad, but pretty badly. Mostly by Hilda, who is, people will recognize that name coming from Three Houses. But in this game, Hilda is I would say, moderate antagonist. She's reasonably important to the story. She's a recurring antagonist, but not necessarily very important. But yeah, so a lot of Tinny's arc, and I'll come out right out and say, I've said it before, but I'll make it clear here. Tinny is my favorite character in the game for this arc. If you go and listen to her boss conversations, she's a really well fleshed out character for this game standards at least. She gets a lot of boss conversations with Hilda. I think also a couple with Bloom, where she really learns to stand on her own and basically make them atone for what they did to atone maybe the wrong word, but she basically avenges her mother and all the things that were done to her, which is really cool to see. I love seeing her evolution throughout the course of the game from this kind of meek little mousy girl who's too weak to stand up for herself to this kind of really independent, strong character. It's fantastic. Unfortunately, gameplay wise, she is not very good. I think she is made significantly better by having Lewin as a dad. She doesn't get pursuit, but she does get adept, a very high speed growth, and the ability to use Elwind at base, which is nice. And I think she also has a conversation with Lewin at some point that, or well, yeah, I mean, yeah, she like visits a castle at some point and gets +5, I believe, +5 magic if Lewin is her dad, which he is. So that's kind of nice. This is probably the best that that Tinny could ever be. I maybe Azel would be a better dad. Other than him, it's kind of up in the air between those two, and it's really a matter of like whether you want pursuit and a high magic stat or a high speed stat and better weapon ranks to start out with. Elwind is definitely the best tome that she can have. It's as strong as El Thunder and El Fire, but is by far the lightest of the three. So she can, I guess she can't double, but she can get not doubled very easily. I'm probably going to give her the pursuit ring just because of favoritism, and I love her so much. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. There are a few conversations that we can have at this point. Diarmid and Nana have a conversation. They're brother and sister, so they talk a little bit. I think Nana gets +1 luck from it, which is negligible, obviously. But I think that the more interesting aspect of it is that so there's a few conversations that we get access to at this point. The first is between Nana and Yarmud. I guess real quick, she gets +1 luck from it, which is nothing. But the more interesting aspect of it is that it talks a little bit about Lachesis and sort of what happened to her after everything in Generation One. I guess she had left Nana in Leinster with Diarmid or with Finn, which kind of supports the idea that maybe if nothing else, Nana is Finn's daughter. Maybe if Jarmuth is not his son, but she apparently left her there and then decided to take off to Isaac in order to try to presumably meet up with Jarmuth and get him to safety. But she never made it to Isaac. Jarmuth unfortunately informs Nana, and they are left to assume that she died while crossing the desert, which is a fairly common occurrence. And they kind of take a minute to be upset about that. So quite sad. Lachesis is a cool character, so it's a shame to see that she is most likely dead. I think this kind of ties into some stuff that happens in Thracia. I don't want to spoil anything, especially since I might be misremembering. It's been a bit. But I think that there was some ideas that maybe she was attacked while crossing the Yied Desert, not just like dying from the elements or the environment, but actually attacked by Loptyr mages. I think that might be what happens. I don't remember though. And the other conversation that you can have at this point is between Ulster's substitute. God, what's it? Yeah, Dalvin and Tristan. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. But they actually get some pretty substantial stat boosts. I believe it's I want to say 2 strength, 1 skill, and 1 defense for Dalvin, and 2 strength, 1 speed, and 1 defense for Tristan. It's something similar to that. Pretty decent stat boosts, all things considered. And they do the pretty common substitute thing, which is to just kind of muse about maybe they're kind of holding the others back because they're not super strong, they don't have holy blood or anything. At this point, you can capture Darna, kill the boss there, and you can recruit Layla, who is a dancer. She is the a substitute for Lean, who I did not get. They're pretty much the same. Layla has charm, or charisma, as it's sometimes called in some older translations. And Lean gets inheritance. So any good items that you would want on uh, on Lean, like any on a dancer, like maybe the bargain ring, the miracle ring or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure there's things you would want on Lean that Layla will not have access to. But the charm is nice. It's not like at the end of the day, a dancer's a dancer's a dancer, especially considering she's on foot and a lot of your units are going to be up in the front lines fighting. So she's probably not going to get a chance to use charm a lot. I guess if you place her strategically, she can be useful in that way. But yeah, I mean she's great. I don't really have a lot to say about her in terms of her gameplay because she's a dancer and dancers are pretty much always good. I don't think there's ever been a dancer in Fire Emblem that was bad. I think the worst you could maybe say is that I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there might be one or two that are just okay. But yeah, so Lean too, but Layla is very, very, very good. In terms of a character, she's kind of forgettable. I do think that she was a little shitty for make basically like making fun of Ares while he was kind of going on his rant about Sigurd and Seliph or whatever. So, but otherwise, I think that I think she's fine. I don't really remember that much about her to be honest. At this point, it's been a while since I played the map, so I'm kind of going off of memory. Once you capture Darna, a few more conversations unlocked. First of all, Finn has possible conversations with three people. This isn't comprehensive, by the way. I missed several conversations already. I think there was, I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier in this episode or not, but one between Shannon and Larce that I did not get. There's one between, I think, Patty and or Daisy, just Daisy and Shannon that gives her +3 strength or something like that. There's a lot of conversations that I haven't been talking about. These are just the ones that I have like written down as like important enough to talk about, like ones that really stood out to me in terms of like writing or characters or significant gameplay advantages. So anyway, Finn has three potential conversations here. I actually didn't have any. The reason is because it's based on who his child is. Finn did not marry anyone in my Gen 1 playthrough, but um, it's possible that he has some children who are among your army at this point, and he can have conversations with them once Darna is captured, and he will give them different stat boosts depending on who it is. So he can talk with Nana and she will get +5 speed. He can talk to Lana, get +5 magic, or talk to Larce, and she will get +5 skill. So pretty substantial stat boost, especially for Nana and Lana. Larce like +5 skill isn't really that much. I think that's like +10 hit, which is kind of nice, especially in 1RN, and gives her some crit, which is kind of cool, I suppose. But otherwise, not really worth anything. One of my favorite conversations in the game is here, and it's between Seliph and Leaf. And I'm gonna reread it real quick because I want to make sure I do it justice. So I just reread it, and it is phenomenal. I mean, it's kind of generic, for sure. Like it's definitely nothing like groundbreaking or that it reveals anything that we didn't already know about these characters. But it does a fantastic job establishing their personalities in a way that a lot of the game just doesn't. Especially Leaf. I'll talk about Sella first, real quick. You know, Seliph just really feels a strong sense of camaraderie with Leaf. I think he really respects the friendship that Quan and Sigurd had. You know, it was kind of a well known thing how close they were, and I think that as a result, Seliph kind of feels that level of like I want to help this guy out if I can because my father and his father were so close, almost like family. And then of course he goes on to mention that his mom Ethelyn is his aunt, so they are literally cousins. But I think that connection between Quan and Sigurd really comes first, and I think it kind of goes to illustrate how much of an influencing factor his father's legacy is on his life. And I think this touches on something that Lewin mentioned. I believe it was at the end of last chapter, with like your father made a lot of connections and had a lot of people on his side, and you can utilize that. You can put his connections to use for you, and I think that that's really what he is taking to heart here. On Leaf's side of things, it's really interesting to see that his main motivator seems to be he has a lot of pride in his bloodline, in his family, especially in his dad, um, as descendants of used to be called Nova, but apparently they have changed the name to I don't know how the fuck to say that. Njorun and with a little two dots over the O, like in the I in naive. I don't I have no idea. Here, let me see if I can. Nyo- Nyorun. 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 Okay. So he is a descendant of Nyorun, and his father has a really strong legacy, and he does not want to bring shame onto that legacy, which I think is kind of a sneak preview of some of what we're going to see in Thracia. I mean, again, having the motivation of, I have my father had a strong legacy and I want to live up to it is not groundbreaking storytelling or anything, but it's just it's compelling and it's why reinvent the wheel? It works and it works well, and I think that they did a really good job with Leaf um in this game, and of course when they fleshed this out a lot more in Thracia, the next game where he's the main character. I'm excited to see, and I'm excited to talk about. I am both really excited and not excited at all to talk about the ratio because I did not find that game fun to play, but I think it'll be a rife game for discussion, and the story is really really good. So I'm excited to talk about that part. But anyway, I have written in my notes here, Finn is a homie, and I am pretty sure that's in reference to this conversation where Leaf talks about how Finn kind of sheltered him and took him from town to town to keep him safe. I think in later on, maybe this is in supplemental material, but it might also be in Thracia. We find out that Finn went hungry in order to make sure that Finn had enough to eat, which I mean, like when he was a baby, all right, yeah, that's I would be kind of fucked up if he didn't do that. But like, I don't think like when he's like 13 or 14, maybe you could start getting away with not doing that. But no, he stuck with it. So good for Finn. Finn's a real one. We love Finn. The Daisy and Shannon conversation is really funny. It's after Bloom is dead, and I need to get better about my note taking because I completely forgot about a lot of this stuff. Daisy jumps out of some bushes to scare the shit out of Shannon, and he gets mad and says, "Hey, why would you do that? I almost just took your head off." And she's like, "I'm bored. I don't have anything to do." And Shannon's like, "Okay, well, let's do some training." And she gets excited, and he says, "Take it seriously, or else we won't do it." It's cute. It's whatever. I forgot to mention, I kind of want to, for posterity's sake, like mention any important items and villages. There is a village in which you get a shield ring. And then the last thing of note before we end the chapter, there is a village in which if you have Layla visit it, just Layla, not Lean, you get a cameo from Anna. Anna is a character that most people know very well at this point, but is notable for appearing in almost every single Fire Emblem game. She's a recurring character in the same vein as someone like Sid from Final Fantasy, where they appear in every game, almost every game, in slightly different ways. I think the only games where she is not present is the original Gaiden and then the remake Shadows of Valentia. Those are the only games where she is not present. But in most games, she just appears on like some bonus map content. Like once you beat the game, you can unlock some trial maps. I think she usually appears there, and then she's usually the icon for like, oh, do you want to suspend your game, which is an option that you can do if you want to take a break in the middle of a map. You can hit suspend, and she'll pop up. But in some games, she's a full-on playable character. In the past three games, that has been the case. Well, not including Shadows of Valentia. In the past three original games, that has been the case. She has been a playable character that is, of varying degrees of quality, but we'll get there. And then occasionally, more often than not, actually, she is a just an NPC in like a village or something like that. Sometimes she'll have a minor role in the story, like in Shadow Dragon. She'll, if you visit her house, you'll figure out how to recruit Jake, stuff like that. And the ending of this map is pretty tame. It's basically just saying that Bloom got away, Bloom escaped, and he is, he's off somewhere, but the people are very supportive of Seliph. He's a great influence on this in on this country, and yeah, they're just talking about what they're going to do next, which is that they're going to move further into the Thracian Peninsula, which comprises two countries: Thracia, obviously on the south, and then I believe the country that you are in currently with Leinster is called the Manster Alliance, is the name of the three countries, or of the because it's a comprised of the three major cities: Ulster, Manster, and then Leinster. The next couple chapters are going to be us moving further into the Manster Alliance and the Thracia Peninsula as a whole. And that's it. That's the end of the chapter. So in terms of where this map ends up in our map gauntlet, I am torn because I like parts of this map a lot. And I also really, really don't like parts of this map. I think that well, ironically, the beginning is both the best and the worst part. Because your army is split in two. You have the Finn, Leaf, and Nana segment, which is very fun. You have to kind of navigate around and it's place your units carefully or else you'll get overwhelmed. But on the upper side of things with Self and the main squad, you have to go capture that first temple, the Yied Shrine, which is not fun. That part really sucks, especially if you are slow and you don't get to the guy before he finds his siege tome that he lost. Then it can be an absolute pain in the ass. So that's not fun. But I'd still say chapter 3 is better. And I think that's kind of gonna be the ball game. I can't think of any other maps that beat chapter 3. I think chapter 7 was the only one that was really gonna stand a chance. Because I do like that opening section with Leaf, Finn, and Nana so much. The middle of the map is really boring. Getting Seliph back down to attack Melgan, and then the march on Ulster is really uneventful and not particularly noteworthy. So I think that chapter 3, which is constantly asking you to think on your feet and keep your army split up and do multiple things at the same time, I think is a lot more enjoyable overall. So that's my thoughts. I think chapter 3 might be my favorite map in the game. So it has been a while, quite a while, and there is a lot to talk about. I'm scrolling through the news right now. It's almost all Heroes stuff, but Heroes has been getting a lot of stuff recently. I actually picked up Heroes a little bit. I haven't been playing it very much. There's like an Ike figure coming out. That's kind of cool. July 2022. Actually, holy shit, that looks really good. You should go look this up. It's really cool looking. I'm sure it's going to be exorbitantly expensive. Figures like this always are, but just really cool. And then there's just the Easter banners. Yeah, okay. So nothing really interesting or exciting happening in the Fire Emblem realm other than that really cool Ike figure, which if that's the sort of thing you're into, then absolutely go nuts. Geez, has it really been like a month and a half and there's still nothing to talk about? I think there was I mean, it's over now, but I think there was some Fire Emblem like charity events going on that you should, if they have the VODs up, you should go. I think Gas Station was, or sorry, Fargast as he's been known as recently, got involved in that, and a couple others. Rin is kind of a new up and coming person in the Fire Emblem scene, and they got together with the some of the voice actors from Three Houses, which I gotta say I have never seen a game voice acting cast so involved with the game's community as they are. It is really really something special. I'm still subscribed to Joe Zaija on YouTube. He I don't watch a lot of his videos, but man, he is thoroughly entertaining, and I highly recommend. He does Claude, in case anyone doesn't know. Um, he's a lot of fun. I would recommend checking out some of his stuff. He's very funny. Yeah, I mean that's really all that's going on in terms of Fire Emblem. In terms of me, I've been trying to dust off my mile long backlog of games when I have time, which isn't very frequently, and so that you know. But I did actually just finish my first Resident Evil game, which is Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I know there's some kind of mixed opinions on that game. I personally really liked it. I thought it was something. I thought that it was a very good action game with scary elements. I wouldn't say that it wasn't scary, but it definitely was not what I would consider to be a horror game. I was never very scared at any point. I think it was just kind of creepy and atmospheric. Really good. Like it was a fantastic game. It had some definitely had some spooky moments. But yeah, it was a fun game. It was a fun game. I definitely want to get more into that series. I have the remake of the original Resident Evil, and also I have Resident Evil 4, both of those on Steam. So I'm probably gonna play those at some point. But otherwise, I've just been playing some bits and pieces of other games. I don't think I've beaten anything else recently. Oh, I beat both Portal games for the first time. Yeah, that's somehow that one managed to evade me for however many years. I think Portal 2 was 2011, so it would have been 10 years since the first game or since the series ended, I should say. Very fun. I think maybe a tad bit overhyped. I think that the writing is was fine. But I think it kind of started to grate a little bit at times. But the puzzles were super fun, and yeah, I think that it was a really enjoyable experience. I mean, I don't know why I'm telling you guys that Portal is good. You guys, like, I'm sure you've heard before. But yeah, if somehow you're like me and you have not tried out Portal at any point before now, they are they're both very cheap on Steam. They're both $10 each. I guess that's not really cheap, but pretty cheap, especially Portal 2 for the amount of content you're getting. $10 is a pretty good deal. And yeah. And then I guess the only other thing is just recently, the past couple days, as I'm recording this, I have been playing Shadows of Mordor, which is a very fun kind of, I guess, hack and slash game, kind of in the style of the Batman Arkham games, um, which is fun. I'm not, it's not like a super compelling combat system, but it's a fun sandbox game to just kind of run around and kill some orcs and do some missions and the the Nemesis system, I think is what they call it. Really fun, really innovative. It's really cool to see, like, you kill the guy kills you and he starts taunting you about it. When you see him again, and then you kill him, and then he comes back later, and it's like this whole deal. Unfortunately, the game's not very hard. I wonder if I could turn the difficulty up, but I've never really had that level of back and forth because once I got the hang of the combat, I haven't died in a really long time because it's really easy to fight off like really big swarms of enemies. Like I think if I had any problem with that game, it's the fact that unless there's some archers kind of on the fringe, you can legit fight off groups of 15 to 20 enemies without any difficulty whatsoever. It takes a little while, but yeah. Once you get the hang of the combat, as long as there's no ranged enemies you have to worry about, you will almost never ever die. And then even if you get low on health, it's really easy to just dip away, hide, get your health back up, and start fighting again. So it's definitely, I think the Nemesis system is a little hamstrung by the fact that the game is so easy, but I also am not very far in, so maybe it gets more difficult. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this slow and steady trickle of episodes. Hopefully, I'll get the next one out to you at some point. The What I found interesting is that it's not actually the playing of the game that's difficult. I mean, obviously, but like I thought it would be more of a time commitment to actually play the game, especially if we're doing, later on we're going to be doing multiple chapters per episode. So I thought that that would kind of be my time crunch is oh, I gotta play all these chapters. It's gonna take me a while. But no, the tricky part is actually finding time to sit down and record. The playing is easy, the editing is pretty easy, especially when you don't give a shit about how the video sounds or how the audio sounds. But yeah, the actual sitting down and writing out my thoughts and talking about them takes longer than you would expect. The raw audio of this is going on 2.5 hours, which is insane. I'm sure it's going to be way, way lower. Yeah, that's enough rambling for me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye. Oh, and I'm a little late to the party on this one, but I wanted to get ahead of this. I know there's only like 12 people that listen to this podcast, but I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression about who I am and what I value as a person. So I'm gonna make this real quick. At the last episode, I talked about how I have been binging a series by the Game Grumps, and if I am not mistaken, that episode came out just before, maybe even literally the day before or a couple days before, the news broke about some shit that had been going on with them. I am no longer subscribed to the Game Grumps, and I would recommend that you look into. I'm not going to recommend that you unsubscribe from the Game Grumps because you're a grown ass adult. Presumably, you can make your own decisions. But I would recommend looking into what's been going on with that, and formulating your own thoughts. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that I had recorded that episode, and put that out before all this shit went down. So just keep that in mind. All right, that's it. That's my spiel.